everyone, and welcome back to another episode of An Apple a Day, a podcast about connecting food to wellness. If you're new in here, hi, welcome. My name is Astrid. I'm a registered dietitian, and my goal is to help you make smarter decisions about food or just learn more about food. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then please keep on listening. Today's episode is actually inspired by one of my listeners. I received this message a few weeks ago from Samantha in Seattle, Washington, and she wrote, "Hello, Astrid. My mother was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I'm thinking that I may be at a higher risk as I get older. Is there anything I can do that can reduce or prevent my risk of developing this disease?" First off, thank you for your message, Samantha. I'm sorry to hear about your mother's diagnosis, and I wish you and your family strength during this difficult time. This message got me thinking. I talk about eating habits and wellness and how you can lead a healthy lifestyle now. But what about the future? How can our diets affect our wellness in 10, 15, 20 years? So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about Alzheimer's disease. Now, I know many of you have heard about Alzheimer's. Some of you may know someone who has it. And according to the Mayo Clinic, an estimated 5.8 million Americans aged 65 or older are living with AD. So Alzheimer's disease is fairly common. Before I jump into anything food related, I'm going to give you a little background on Alzheimer's disease itself. Many of us are familiar with the symptoms: memory loss, impaired judgment, confusion. The exact cause of Alzheimer's is currently unknown, but it is most likely due to the aggregation of the protein beta amyloid within the neocortex, and this results in damaged neurons and brain shrinkage. So that's the extent of my knowledge on Alzheimer's, so I've invited here my good friend and colleague, Dr. Amelia Navarre, to explain a little bit more about Alzheimer's and its dietary connection. A little background on Dr. Navarre. She completed her undergraduate degree in nutrition and neuroscience at Stanford University, then went on to get her PhD at Harvard with a concentration in dietary impacts on genetic diseases, including Alzheimer's, and she is currently a professor and researcher at Dartmouth. Welcome to the pod, Dr. Navarre.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Now, I must say, your list of credentials is pretty impressive.
Thank you.
I love having guest speakers that are just so passionate about their work. And from what I understand, you are pretty passionate about Alzheimer's prevention. So what inspired you to start this research journey?
Well, when I was in college, my uncle got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was a really tough time for my family. So, as a nutritionist, I made it my mission to find connections between genetic susceptibility and dietary behavior. Wow,
that's similar to what our listener Samantha is going through. As I mentioned, Samantha is concerned about her genetic susceptibility to Alzheimer's, and I'm sure many of my listeners feel the same way. So, is there any genetic or inheritable aspect to Alzheimer's? If someone has a family history of Alzheimer's, should they be concerned?
Interesting question. Actually, several studies have found a link between Alzheimer's and family history. However, this link is complex, as no single gene mutation is responsible for Alzheimer's disease. Early onset Alzheimer's is related to family history of the disease. Though rare, early onset Alzheimer's occurs before a person is 65. Inherited mutations in the beta amyloid precursor protein, presenilin-1 and presenilin-2, can cause early onset Alzheimer's. All three of these mutations affect the proteins that are part of the gamma secretase complex. These mutations alter the protein functions and thus lead to beta aggregation.
So that's early onset Alzheimer's. What about late onset Alzheimer's?
Unfortunately, genetic susceptibility to late onset Alzheimer's is not currently clear.
So I know that there has been research on other genetic diseases and their links to nutrition, for example, calcium intake and osteoporosis. But what I find so fascinating about your research is that your focus is specifically on omega-3 consumption and Alzheimer's prevention.
Yes, as a neuroscientist with an interest in nutrition, that intersection is fascinating to me. We really are what we eat.
That's so true. It's really interesting that omega-3 fatty acids can be related to Alzheimer's prevention. In case any of my listeners didn't know, omega-3 fatty acids are one of two essential fatty acids, meaning our bodies can't make them, so we have to get it from our food. There are three main forms of omega-3 fatty acids: EPA and DHA, common in salmon and sardines, and ALA, which we get from plant sources. If you want to learn more about omega-3s, be sure to check out episode 15, where I take more of a deep dive into this topic.
I listened to that episode. Very informative.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're a fan. Just to add on to the importance of omega-3s, they play a vital part in regulating cell receptors and membranes, where the synthesis of hormones that regulate blood clotting, inflammation, and movement of artery walls begin. They therefore can reduce inflammation and blood clotting and increase blood vessel relaxation.
Exactly. In addition, they also bind receptors that regulate genetic functions, such as Alzheimer's disease. As you mentioned, fish are abundant in omega-3 fatty acids, so high dietary intake could reduce genetic susceptibility. So a meta-analysis of observational studies examining fish intake and Alzheimer's risk was conducted, and when piling together all the studies, 2 categories of fish intake were established: less than 500 grams a week and more than 500 grams a week. Compared to those who ate the lower amount of fish, those who had the highest fish intake were associated with a 36% lower risk of Alzheimer's.
Wow, that is truly fascinating. I could never imagine nutrition having such a large impact on a genetic disease.
I know, right? Such interesting research. However, the protective effect of high fish intake may be a result of many dietary factors. As you know, fish is a good source of other nutrients that contribute to cognitive health. High fish consumption is often an indicator of a healthier dietary pattern, and high fish consumption may be associated with a lower intake of other less healthy fats.
Not only that, incorporating fish into our diets is very beneficial for other reasons. Fish can lower your risk of CVD, improve cognitive health, treat depression, and even improve sleep quality. I've had a lot of clients who really benefited from adding fish to their diets.
That's great to hear. Omega-3s truly are important.
So going back to Samantha's question, did these studies factor in genetic susceptibility in their findings?
Unfortunately, they didn't. So there is currently a lack of consistent evidence for the potential of omega-3s to delay the progression of Alzheimer's. I would say that more research is definitely needed, and that's what I'm focusing on right now.
Great. So, Dr. Navarre, what steps, if any, should we take to lower our genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease?
Overall, there is no definitive evidence that consumption of omega-3 fatty acids prevents early or late onset Alzheimer's. However, taking omega-3 supplements or simply increasing the amount of fish in your diet has no drawbacks, and it may aid in delaying the onset of Alzheimer's. Furthermore, there have been animal trials that have shown that consumption of omega-3 can reduce overall levels of the beta amyloid in your brain. Some studies also show that omega-3 uptake has increased cognition overall, which is beneficial for Alzheimer's patients. For definitive answers, more randomized controlled studies are needed, especially with large sample sizes and controlled placebos.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Dr. Navarre. I definitely appreciate your knowledge, and I'm sure my listeners do too.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm always excited to share the groundbreaking research being done.
Thanks to Samantha for submitting your question, and I hope it has been answered. Also, if anyone wants to learn more about the studies Dr. Navarre mentioned, please check out the links in my bio. They will also be posted at the end of this video. If any other listeners have a question that they would like to be answered on the pod, please feel free to reach out at anappleadaypod@gmail.com. That's anappleadaypod@gmail.com. This podcast is edited by Katrina Hardman. It's produced by Joseph Jimenez. Our communications coordinator is Glenn Levins, and our editorial assistant is Robin Montgomery. Special thanks again to our guest speaker, Dr. Amelia Navarre. Thank you again for listening, and don't forget, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Have a great week, everyone.